and what is happening in terms of protests. I want to bring in Ascon Kamili, who is a political analyst. Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm happy you made it. You know, I hear Thika Road. Things are quite. Well,
I understand. I was coming from Gong Road, so I really didn't know what was going on Thika Road.
Yeah.
But I hear a lot of activities already are happening out there, and there's that general scare, as I've had the reporters say out there. So many people are not very ready to have their lives disrupted by, the protests that are going to be done by the opposition today.
Yeah.
So it is pretty cold in Nairobi, but we hope it will not make it much worse.
I hope so. But as you've mentioned, the fact that Kenyans are scared. Kenyans are worried. Yeah. We've seen what's happening in Mombasa. We're seeing, what is likely to happen in Nairobi. When you look at protest, ideally, it is a constitutional right. Yeah. And for example, giving an example of Mombasa, those protesters did say that they're going to be peaceful.
Right.
But still, that does not change much in terms of when it comes to the police and ensuring that they protect citizens when it comes to picketing. Talk to us about that, the blatant disregard of law.
It is very interesting that protests are held world over. There have been protests in France, there have been protests in South Africa, there have been protests in Nigeria just after the election of the current president.
Yeah.
And it is very interesting that it's only in Kenya that when protests are held, then it makes news all over the world. And that is because of the particular fact that when protests are held in Kenya, they turn into very violent demonstrations where people lose businesses, lives are lost, and such very bad news go out there. So that is where the attention comes from.
Yeah.
But that takes me to why this happens. The Constitution provides that whenever we feel disgruntled, whenever we feel our issues need to be addressed, we have the avenue, of going out there and expressing ourselves without being disrupted by anybody, not even the police. Actually, the police is supposed to provide security while you're doing your peaceful picketing. You'll also realize that the Constitution has very clear guidelines on how this should be done, how you're supposed to, brief the security apparatus, how you're supposed to, conduct yourself while doing your picketing. However, we realize that there's a very big distinction between picketing done by the civil rights groups, picketing done by the common wananchi. I remember the other time the traders, I think traders from Nyamakima or somewhere, were doing their demonstrations in town, and it ended peacefully. But there's a big distinction between that form of picketing and demonstration with what happens when the opposition party calls for demonstrations. You realize they'll descend into beating people on the road, injuring others, lives are lost, and things like that. I think that is where now the police come in to disperse them. For instance, you just gave a clear overview of what happened in Mombasa a few minutes ago. They began very well when the civil rights groups were there. When the politicians came on board, things went south and the police had to do something.
Yeah.
So this is what happens. Our opposition has this mentality that when such bad news or such bad things happen, that's when they'll get the attention of the world. That's when they'll get the attention of the international community. When a life is lost, the international community will have to do something, or will have to say something. When people are complaining that their businesses are shut, that's when now the whole world gets the attention, gives us the attention. And that's not the right thing to do. What we need to do is we need to take advantage of what the Constitution provides and follow the law and ensure that our grievances are heard and are addressed accordingly.
Yeah.
We have other avenues like the courts of law. The finance bill that forms part of the reasons why Azimio is going to, or the opposition is going to the streets, has been properly addressed by the courts of law. And I don't think the president so far has ignored any of the court orders that has been given. If it were in other spaces or even in other countries, other jurisdictions, presidents have blatantly dismissed such positions of the court. In Kenya, we have seen the president has been dismissed on the question of the CASS. I've not had him demand that they report to office with total disregard to what the courts say.
Yeah.
He has been dismissed on the finance bill by the courts. He is proposing to go for an appeal. The same thing can equally be addressed by the courts of law without having to lose lives, without having to lose businesses. And I think the opposition should consider that.
Yeah, but let's just not forget one thing. In Mombasa, it was peaceful.
Yeah.
Even when the politicians arrived, it was still peaceful.
Right.
Did the police really need to engage them?
I think, to be fair, the police need to exercise a level of restraint when they are dealing with protesters. In some instances, the police have become very aggressive and have actually gone ahead to use excessive force when they're, stabilizing or making stable the environment where protests are happening. In other instances, I've seen that the demonstrators actually provoke the police. So there's a very fine line there, and it's important that both sides who are in the field, exercise a level of caution whenever they're engaging in this protest. But more importantly, it is very interesting that protests are happening in Moscow almost every day, and no such things are reported. Protests are happening all over the world. EFF was doing the protests in South Africa the other day, and we saw very organized, uniformed protesters who brought their petitions to the right offices where they intended to bring their petitions, and it was properly taken care of. Right now, your reporter is reporting in Kisumu that, and actually that can be corroborated by a post by one of my friends in Kisumu, was going for a business meeting, and she has been stopped by very rowdy youths at the same spot that your reporter is giving us information that this is happening. So this is where I'm getting concerned that really both sides, the police and the protesters alike, they need to exercise caution and to ensure that the protest, which is their constitutional right, is done within the confines of the law.
So I'm curious then. So then we've seen cases of journalists, being on the wrong side of this, attacked by police.
Right.
What would you say in that case?
It's very wrong. Nobody can justify such level of high-handedness. The police are supposed to protect you. The police is supposed to guard you whenever you are in such circumstances. And even if you are on the wrong, the police is not supposed to beat you up. They're supposed to apprehend you and bring you to a court of law so that you're heard. The journalists have a place and provided for by the law in such circumstances. I don't expect a journalist to be manhandled in that fashion by the police. And that is very wrong. So therefore, little wonder we have institutions that are meant to deal with such matters, and I hope they take them seriously. Whenever the Police Service Commission and the other one that deals with when the police exercise their power, they go beyond their space of authority. There's an institution that is supposed to deal with this. I think they need to take such things seriously and deal with such police officers with the authority and with the power that
all right, but this has been happening. It's not the first time, it won't be the last time. Okay, but before we even continue with this, I want us to just speak our investigative reporter Francis Ode. He's joining us via phone. Francis, good morning. Talk to us about Nairobi. What is happening? Last we know of is the fact that the police boss has said the rally is legal, but they will not be allowed into the CBD. What else do we know?
Good morning, Ashley. Indeed, yes, it's a cold morning with Saba Saba protest going on. On issues of security, I must say, yes, dozens of police have been deployed in various places in the CBD and across Nairobi. We've seen inspection of cars currently going on at State House. We have been going round, and police have been deployed in major roads. We've seen at the State House Road, we have seen police there. We've also seen police at the State House Avenue. We've also seen the processional way. Police have been deployed there, ready to do their work. And even Dennis Street, again, along Ngong Road, we've seen a lot of officers on trucks and patrols. In Langata Road, we've gone there, and we've seen also the road that connects Kibera and Langata has been also, there are police there. And even Mbagathi, the road that connects Mbagathi and Ngong Road. We've also seen police, anti-riot police heavily deployed in those. We are yet to go to Mathare, where we are on our way headed to Mathare, and then we will proceed to Kawangware. We also understand that different locations, we have seen police officers being deployed there. In Kibra, so far, the heavy deployment of officers, we all understand that this is the backyard of the Azimio leader, Raila Odinga, who declared Saba Saba rally across the country. So far in the CBD, we have seen the entire place, the entire route that gets into the CBD has been already surrounded by anti-riot police. and the normal police. We've also seen and interacted with the police, the normal police who are not in the uniform. They are also deployed in various locations along the entrance and the locations and the roads that bring passengers into the CBD. So far, in the CBD, we've also seen that there is calmness and there is nothing much that is going on. The day is calm, just like any other day, but different businesses have opened, while others they have opted to close. We shall be keeping a close eye to the security situation. I'm going around tracking the situation on the ground, looking at the security situation and how the police officers will be handling the protest this day.
All right. Thank you so much, Francis Ode, for that status update. Of course, we'll continue linking up with you as we go on. But that's the update we're getting right now. So far, everything is calm, but there is heightened insecurity. Police officers are almost in majority of the roads that, we're likely to see protesters using. Now, I want to come back to this conversation. Ascon is still here with me. Earlier on, you're talking about the fact that, it's a two-way. You're blaming both sides, both the protesters and both the police officers. But you equally mentioned the fact that we have authorities such as IPOA who are meant to, help with such situations. Let's not forget that IPOA has over and over, time and time immemorial, called out police officers. Let's not forget either the fact that everything goes sideways once the police get there. Protests are usually peaceful until the police provoke the protesters.
Okay, I wouldn't agree entirely with that assertion, considering that we have seen other circumstances or other instances where actually the protesters are the ones who provoke the police.
But in certain areas.
So it's a balance of responsibility, where the police is supposed to exercise caution to a certain level, and the protesters are also supposed to exercise caution. The police will not sit somewhere and watch the protesters beat an innocent citizen. They'll have to do something. That is their responsibility. The police will not sit somewhere and watch as somebody's shop is, looted. They have to do something. And what is the closest thing they will do? Because the protesters are usually armed with stones and some very dangerous weapons in that sense. The police will have to lob tear gas, which will then definitely cause a lot of, confusion in that space. So therefore, my position, very objectively, is that there needs to be caution on both ends, and it's a balance of responsibilities. Just in the very same fashion that the police need to exercise caution while dealing with the journalists who are in the field and also dealing with the protesters must equally exercise caution and know that their rights end where mine begins or any other person begins. The person who is opening their shop in Kibra has a right to open their shop, just like you have a right to do your protests in Kibra. Do not have to overstep your space and go into somebody else's space and cause confusion there. It is what the law says, and the police are there to enforce the law. So for me, I would not want to defend the police entirely. I would want to ask them to exercise caution and ensure that they guard the protesters, but equally demand the protesters exercise caution and ensure that everybody does their things without disruption.
All right. You know why I'm sort of questioning this, and maybe we shouldn't dwell on this much more. But you see, for example, what happened in Mombasa, as I had mentioned, it was peaceful. But shortly after, when the police arrived, they were told to sit on the ground. And then they agreed that, okay, we'll continue, we'll be peaceful. They decided, okay, let's continue. They talked to the OCPD Kisauni constituency. They were moving on. Once the politicians arrived, it was a whole different story. No one had engaged the police officers, but they engaged.
No, I think
so then who is supposed to, defend
the police should
Kenyans?
Then take responsibility. And that's why I mentioned that there are authorities and institutions that have been mandated to take care of such aggression by the police. The IPOA is in that space where they're supposed to, bring to account such police officers who use excessive force whenever they are operating or whenever they're out there doing their work. Now, the IPOA should equally realize that they are not limited to just calling out the police and demanding that they act accordingly. They have as much authority as to bring them to account and demand that they actually work within the confines of the law. But as you said, we need not to dwell much into that. Our responsibility should be, as a citizen, exercise your rights within the confines of the law. As an officer of the court or as a police officer, please exercise your rights or your responsibilities within the confines of the law.
All right. Yeah. I want us to take a short break, but even as we take that short break, I want us to just take a look at the situation in Kisumu. Those are live pictures you're getting right now. Shortly, they should be on your screen shortly. We're seeing the streets of Kisumu are empty, as of course, well, a few people here and there, but majorly they're empty. Earlier on, we spoke to Bramwell Bwire, and he did mention that, of course, businesses are closed. People are fearing, the outcome of the protest. So businesses are closed, streets are empty. Majority of the people have decided to remain home and just wait and see what happens today as the Saba Saba